Nihilism. I despise nihilism. For quite some time, I have considered nihilism to be perhaps my greatest philosophical enemy. What is nihilism? Political and philosophical positions always boil down to the definitions being used. Unfortunately, there are often many conflicting definitions being used. The nihilism that I despise is the nihilism that I describe, not any other nihilism. My definition is taken from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Quote, "Nihilism is the belief that all values are baseless, and that nothing can be known or communicated. It is often associated with extreme pessimism." End quote. That is my definition of nihilism. When I say I despise nihilism, it is the philosophy described by this definition that faces my disdain. This is a very simple definition, but a very good one. Let us begin tearing nihilism apart, one piece at a time. Nihilism, as described here, has three main characteristics. The idea that nothing can be known, extreme pessimism, and the idea that all values are baseless. We shall consider the philosophical merits of these characteristics one at a time. Firstly, we have the idea that nothing can be known. The main issue with this is that it is absurd. And when I say absurd, I don't mean stupid, ridiculous, or silly, although it is all of those things. I mean to say that it is self-contradictory. The nihilist claims to know that nothing can be known. If we can know that nothing can be known, we can know something, namely that nothing can be known. This sentiment is self-contradictory. The idea that nothing can be known is itself a claim to know something, and is therefore self-defeating. The claim is incompatible with itself. This is a very serious flaw. The idea that we know nothing is itself a claim to know something. The fact that this sentiment is self-contradictory is bad enough. It isn't just self-contradictory, however. The idea that nothing can be known is philosophically worthless. It offers nothing, and is only detrimental to the interests of the rational actor. Whether or not anything can be truly and definitively known is not as important as it sounds. What is important is the basis of a reason. In truth, there are two gods. They call one pain, and the other pleasure. The two forces which give everything else its meaning. The two sovereign masters, as Jeremy Bentham wisely proclaimed. The basis of reason. I am not particularly concerned with some esoteric metaphysical construction of truth. I am concerned with usefulness. Usefulness in terms of pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain. Usefulness is the basis upon which knowledge can be and should be founded. Sure, I don't know anything with certainty. I know my senses can deceive me. I know my brain can deceive me. But it does seem to be the case that having some faith in these things allows me to effectively pursue pleasure and avoid pain. This is practical knowledge, and it is tremendously valuable to the rational actor. Knowledge based on usefulness. Knowledge based on rational desirability. I don't definitively know if it is true, but I do know that regarding it as such is irrationally desirable. I don't definitively know if it is untrue, but I do know that regarding it as such is irrationally undesirable. Of course, the philosophy of knowledge, epistemology, is highly complex, far more complex than I am giving it credit for here. But I think you understand my point. The idea that nothing can be known exists exclusively to discourage a pursuit of knowledge which has been and will continue to be immensely useful for pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain. A pursuit of knowledge upon which so much is founded, from the technology with which modern nihilists espouse their idiocy, to the reasoning with which they attempt to fortify absurdity. Nihilism is wrong about knowledge. Its foundational claims are self-contradictory. It exists as nothing more than a toothless rejection of practical knowledge, a knowledge built on usefulness, a knowledge that is of immense value to the rational actor. Now we come to another key characteristic of nihilism: extreme pessimism. Extreme pessimism is the embodiment of voluntarily feeling greater misery than you must. Nothing is as inconsistent with the basis of reason as this. And inconsistency with the basis of reason is irrationality. Extreme pessimism so easily becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When everyone believes that everything is hopeless, everything becomes hopeless. The idea that a better society is impossible makes a better society impossible. The idea that we face insurmountable obstacles is perhaps the closest thing to an insurmountable obstacle. While a limited degree of realistic pessimism is completely defensible, the extreme pessimism characteristic of nihilism represents nothing more than a source of unnecessary misery and a needless obstacle on the road to a better world. The embrace of such unnecessary misery, the embrace of such an obstacle, is the highest form of irrationality. The extreme pessimism of nihilism represents nothing more than the embrace of unnecessary suffering. The extreme pessimism of nihilism represents nothing more than pure irrationality. Not just because it is often entirely at odds with reality, but because it is entirely at odds with the basis of reason. Now we come to our final characteristic of nihilism: the idea that all values are baseless. This is entirely false. Values do have a basis, and that basis is the basis of reason. People are loyal to the values which make them feel meaning, fulfillment, satisfaction, comfort, and happiness. Each and every one of these things is simply a form of pleasure. Pain and pleasure give everything its meaning. Having said that, some values are more and less consistent with a rational advance from the basis of reason onwards. This is an incredibly nuanced topic, but I will do my best to summarize to the best of my ability. All morality is founded on the basis of reason, but some is far more cleanly founded on the basis of reason. The basis of reason is the first block of every tower, but some builders are better at placing additional blocks than others. All morality is founded on the basis of reason, but only some morality rationally aligns with the basis of reason. While all morality attempts to serve the basis of reason in some way or another, some morality does so far more effectively than others. When one rationally proceeds from the basis of reason, some moral systems are found to serve the basis of reason better than others. They are more consistent with it. All moral systems are founded on that basis, but some serve that foundation better than others. Various moral systems represent more and less rational ways of engaging with the basis of reason. All are attempts, but not all attempts are equal. Thoughtful consideration of the basis of reason leads to a preference for some moral systems and against other moral systems. Many nihilists will also claim that values cannot be judged. This is the natural conclusion of believing that all values are baseless. But if values do have a basis, as they do, we can judge them based on their ability to serve that basis. We can judge them through considerations of how effectively they serve the basis of reason. We can judge them through thoughtful considerations of the extent to which they logically follow from the basis of reason, the capacity for pain and pleasure. Considerations of usefulness, rationality, and desirability can be used to judge values. We have tools for measuring values. We would be wise to use them. Values are not all equal. Values exist to serve the basis of reason, and some values logically follow from the basis of reason, while others contradict the basis of reason. The superiority of many superior values is justified by a few rational moral systems, namely the morality of rational designation, the morality of rational justification, and/or the morality of rational considerations. These rational moral systems act as justifications for the superiority of some values. Allow me to give an extremely brief summary of each of these systems. Let us begin with the morality of rational designation. This system holds that something can be labelled moral or immoral on the grounds that labelling it as such is irrationally desirable. Moral labels are applied based on the rational desirability of their application. It is moral because it is worth calling it so. It is immoral because it is worth calling it so. Worth is determined by rational desirability. The moral label is a rational designator of the extent to which an action, system, or idea is desirable or undesirable. Then we have the morality of rational justification. This system holds that every action, system, and idea represents a justification, a universal justification of its fundamental essence. Some justifications are rational, while others are irrational. Some actions, systems, and ideas are irrational and/or rationally desirable on the grounds that they represent a rational justification. Some actions, systems, and ideas are irrational and/or rationally undesirable on the grounds that they represent an irrational justification. Then we have the morality of rational considerations. Various rational moral imperatives and obligations are born out of consideration of one's capacity for suffering. Following from consideration of one's capacity for suffering, what is irrational if not the corrosion of empathy and compassion? What is rational if not the propagation of empathy and compassion? When one considers their capacity for suffering, various rational moral considerations begin to emerge. Rational moral considerations with which one's behaviour must be consistent. Embedded in these considerations are rational moral obligations and imperatives. Each of these rational value systems are moral in the sense that they guide behaviour when interacting with others. One does not necessarily have to choose one system or another. To some extent, all can exist simultaneously as three dimensions of rational morality. All of these moral systems provide a means of creating and identifying values that are not only not baseless, but which logically follow from the basis of reason. Values that have a solid foundation in one's capacity for pain and pleasure. These moral systems represent a more thoughtful and rational engagement with the basis of reason than the dogmatic babblings and incoherent utterings with which they compete. They represent a means of creating and identifying superior values, values which logically follow from the basis of reason, values which not only have a basis, but a firm basis with which they are utterly consistent. Nihilism is wrong about values. Nihilism is wrong about morality. Such matters are anything but baseless. Like all human affairs, such matters are founded on the basis of reason, although some represent a more logical advance from that basis than others. The key characteristics of nihilism are beyond flawed. The philosophical flaws of nihilism are almost as numerous as they are great. It is a grave tragedy that the decline of religion has led to the birth of something equally grotesque, namely an all-consuming nihilism. As post-religious society steadily emerges, it is consumed by a cancerous nihilism. But it doesn't have to be. We don't have to choose between religion and nihilism. We can choose the third option. We can choose the right option. We can choose reason. We can choose rationality.